And now on to our guest, John Stainer, Managing Director Americas for Nielsen Sports. As Managing Director, John Stainer heads Nielsen Sports activities across the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. John led the growth of Nielsen Sports Insight programs in the UK and Ireland. Key clients include Royal Bank of Scotland, Global Ocean Rates, HSBC, and Standard Chartered Bank. John was also one of the 30 individuals recognized in the Leaders Under 40 class of 2018. And with that, welcome to John, and I will pass it over to Josh.
Man, all these people get Leaders of 40 under 40. I just completely missed out on that whole opportunity. John, welcome.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Shanna. Really delighted to be here today. And first up, I just want to say, I hope everyone that's on the line is healthy, well, as sane as possible, doing well in their own personal and professional environments. And Josh, to you and the team at Sports Innovation Lab, a really big thanks for everything that you guys do for the industry, for running these events, and also for allowing me to be part of your sponsorship advisory board as well.
John, that was very, very thoughtful of you, and I appreciate you starting that way. As you guys heard from Shanna, we started this AMA series really in response to what we all felt was tremendous uncertainty, right? And that was back in March. You're joining us, but also your involvement on the leadership board has been great. So it's been helpful to kind of not only just follow what Nielsen's always studying and learning about, which is this idea that, I don't know, that ratings and data can give you comfort or visibility into where things are, but also where things are headed. Most of the people, I mentioned this in my LinkedIn post promoting this conversation, most people know Nielsen for their media ratings, right? So it's pretty motherhood and apple pie for you guys to talk about what shows are trending or what media is doing well or not well. But I don't think a lot of people understand your sports business. So can you take for a second and just kind of give people a landscape of what you're in charge of there and what your team does on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, absolutely. So look, I actually run a sports and games and esports business. So we are collecting media consumption data that is at the heart of what Nielsen does as a business here in the US, but we're also collecting information on consumer behavior and attitudes. So their interest in particular sports and entertainment genres, their affinity towards brands and brand sectors, how they feel about sponsorships. And then we provide a whole ream of analysis around the valuation of sponsorships. So at its core, that's looking at media exposure for brands that are sponsoring events and teams and celebrities, and understanding the value of that, to providing more detailed analysis around holistic valuations of sponsorships, thinking about the value of IP and the value of intangible assets, the value of association. So in a nutshell, that's what we do. But we are laser focused on the entertainment industry, and principally in sports, games, and esports.
And your background from basically Replicom days to today, very different. How's the business changed?
Yeah, so look, firstly, I'm an Englishman working here in the US. So I was running the Replicom business in London for about 4 or 5 years, leading up to the acquisition by Nielsen in the mid part of 2016. I'm in my 3rd season here in the US. I joined the business in January 2018. Listen, the acquisition of the Replicom business was, I think, a kind of like the perfect marriage. It was combining the consultancy services and solutions and the logo, let's just call it the logo counting business that Replicom had created, and the industry currency they created, alongside the media consumption, consumer behavior business that Nielsen has. So a large part of my focus since I've been here is around combining and merging those two businesses and thinking about the future state of sponsorship analytics.
The biggest thing for, I think, most people to understand is that your approach to evaluating sponsorship is not just done with the traditional Nielsen survey panels and data collection from users and fans, but you have some technology that you apply to this as well. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys have done in that area?
Yeah, so at the heart of our business is a core valuation service, and that really centers on unified media measurement of brands appearing in broadcasts, in digital, across social platforms, and assigning a value to that. And we're really the only business that has all the key ingredients to that evaluation. So that is the ratings data. That is really important. It's the cost data, and then it's also the actual brand exposure analysis. And you asked about some of the platform and technology around that. We have some video image recognition technology that works on the machine learning and AI capabilities that supports our tracking of logos. We do that not just here in the US, but in the 15 countries that we're present in around the world. So we're able to benchmark the likes of the NBA and the NFL and the MLB versus the EPL, Serie A, Formula One, J-League, Japanese baseball, National Rugby League down under. So the AI technology really fuels the analysis of our logos, and then we serve that through a SaaS-based platform. So our clients have fingertip access to that data, and they can slice and splice the data by sponsorship, by campaign, by the different inventory that they're purchasing.
So I think a lot of people don't understand what this AI technology does at scale. So let's try to be real specific, right? In the past, people that measured sponsorship and impressions would go in and they'd literally have people sit there and tag every time they do something, right?
Stopwatch.
Yeah, if I saw Coca-Cola's brand, I'd do this and stuff like that. So what does the AI actually do? Is it looking for the logos? Is it looking for the duration of the time that the logo is on the screen? Does it have any sense of how engaged I am as a consumer?
Yeah, so look, it doesn't look at a consumer engagement. What it does is that it finds the logos, but it then provides a whole load of metadata behind that logo. So that will be the exposure airtime. It will be the quality of that image in terms of its size on the screen, where it's positioned, and we do that not just on broadcast. That's done through social platforms as well. And then we combine our media cost data and then our ratings data to then build out a valuation of that exposure. And we use the same methodology across all platforms and across all sports and across every market that we operate in.
And it's a crowded market, right? And a lot of young companies are sort of moving into this space with their next generation algorithm or something like that. Where's the difference between what you guys do and what a competitor may do? Is it the quality of the algorithm itself? Is it the breadth of what you can measure? What's the idea?
Look, first and foremost, the ingredients. Like I said, right at the outset, we're the only company that has the exposure data, the ratings data, and the cost data. And the ratings data is really important, and we're seeing that right now, right? Because we're seeing fluctuations in viewership here in the US and in Europe with the return of live sports events. So without that information, you don't understand what those fluctuations are, where the ebbs and flows are, where the peaks and troughs are, and the impact that therefore has on the value of the exposure. So that's a really big one. And then I think the other one is the sort of breadth and depth of our analysis. One going back, 10 plus years from the Replicon days, and two across multiple markets, multiple sponsorships, multiple sports and genres. So if you're a brand looking at assessing a portfolio of opportunities, we have the analysis to be able to benchmark the potential opportunities they might be looking at.
And when you look at how things have changed because of COVID, have you had to tweak the algorithm now that there aren't fans in the stands?
No, because this is purely what we see on media. So it's, what's visible on screen and any screen and platform. So there's no change there. Obviously, the tracking of the audience and the consumption around that is critical, and we've obviously seen some changes around that.
The camera angle is completely different, right? I mean, they're not doing as many pans and things like that. So.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point you raised, Josh. And when I think about some of the things that we did right at the start of COVID, I think there were a few things that I was really focused on. One was leadership. Okay, like I need to provide really great leadership to my team. No one's ever encountered this before. You know this, and you've been going through this with your team. We are leading on the edge right now. So I had to provide some really strong leadership there, but also some leadership into the marketplace. And by doing that, I think about how we're useful to our clients and to the industry. And then probably the third area that I've been focused on, along with a key group of people in our product team, our engineering team, other commercial folk around the world, is thinking about Nielsen Sports relevancy in the marketplace in the future. So thinking about what the future state of sponsorship analytics is. But when we go back to that sort of like being useful in the marketplace, and you started talking about camera angles and things, one of the big things that we started pushing out was analysis of white space. And by that, I mean, potential assets that could be branded when sports comes back live on the screen that haven't been branded before. Mm-hmm. We've obviously seen there's obviously loss in games, loss in viewership, therefore loss in kind of value for brands that are buying principally for media buys and exposure. So, we provide a creative approach around helping, league owners and teams and brands understand where the white space value might be for them. Great example is all the stadium seat branding that you're starting to see in sports, whether that's in the European football leagues, whether that's in some of the MLB games, and what we expect to see coming up with the NFL. And we've been working with up to about 10 teams in the NFL around helping them understand the value of that seat branding for the future season.
Yeah, so I think that's a great way to talk about what we see between the NBA and the NHL. The NBA has been doing the virtual fans, letting them sit in the seats, and then I'm sure you guys have an opinion on this. What's the NHL branding worth in those stadiums?
Sorry, Josh, just repeat that.
So within the stadiums in the NHL, the playoffs now and leading up into the playoffs, they put branding or they put logos and they did things on the seats instead of putting the fans in those stands. Yeah.
And so you're asking what?
Do you have an opinion on the ROI there versus?
Oh, yes. Sorry. Yeah. So look, we did a little like predictive analysis ahead of the seasons coming back, and a lot of that analysis was suggesting and estimating that that league owners and team owners and brands would recoup the lost value through lost gains by these new branding assets. Look, and obviously that varies by location and team and sport, but in general terms, from the analysis that we did, we saw that people would recoup the lost value.
And since this is an AMA, people get to weigh in on all different topics. So Dan asks you who your favorite EPL team is.
Yeah, so Dan, I responded back to that as Tottenham Hotspur. Come on, you Spurs.
Yeah. That was very, very relevant, Dan, to the topic at hand, for sure. So let's go to one that's more related to your business, which is Ashley asks, what are you seeing in terms of advancement with women's sports sponsorship? And how is Nielsen playing a role in helping to grow this market with either additional analytics that you used to have or paying more attention to some of the properties that are out there?
Listen, I think we have a really strong point of view on one, women in sport, and two, women's events and women's sports sponsorships. We have a couple of white papers that we've produced on that. as part of all of our surveys, we include analysis of sports, of women's sports events as well. So there's a return to sports survey that we're doing at the moment, and that includes an analysis of a number of the women's sports events, whether that's the LPGA, whether it's the WNBA, whether it's the NWSL. So look, we see that as being a strong market in the future. We've seen some really great steps, actually, I think, over in the UK in terms of sponsorship investment in women's sport, and we have a very strong presence there. So yeah, big market for us. You'll continue to see more analysis from us around women and sport, but you'll continue to see a lot more analysis from us around diversity and inclusion generally.
And one of the things you said is, in addition to providing strong leadership for your team, you're thinking about how to be useful for your clients. You guys increased the frequency with which you were doing some of the market studies and fan sentiment around COVID and the return to sports. You sent me some analysis before this call. Really interesting stuff. Do you want to just touch on some of the things that you think are top of mind? And then I'd like to ask you about some specifics that you mentioned in the report.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's give everyone a little bit of context. I think as COVID hit and we were all sort of like thinking like what happens next, again, we wanted to provide a bit of leadership in the industry and to our clients and be helpful and useful. So in May, we launched a landscape survey around the return to sport with a focus really on consumer sentiment and consumer confidence of returning to live sports events in stadia and arenas, but also to understand attitude and sentiment to the key stakeholders in the industry, the sports properties, the brands and fans themselves, in the role that they have to play in terms of bringing back live sports, catering for new broadcast experiences, and some of the safety measures that they put in place. So that was that was the sort of focus of it. Look, I think we've actually had some really nice feedback from clients from doing that. So I mean, even from the initial report that we did, one thing that's come out very strongly throughout every wave of analysis that we've done since the May wave is the role of the sports property holder and rights holder and the way they conduct themselves around COVID. The importance of cause-related marketing initiatives, the importance of safety first and people first, and the Las Vegas Raiders who were obviously hosting the NFL draft this year and had to do that virtually. They picked up on some of the analysis that we had done around the impact of cause-related marketing and how rights holders conduct themselves, and they did a really nice community initiative around the sale of their NFL draft cap, and they donated $10 to one of the Las Vegas food banks for every cap that was sold. And that sort of analysis got up to the exec, and they talked about the importance of that, and they made a decision off the back of that, which was absolutely great.
Yeah, and you were at our leadership board meeting when Athletes Unlimited, the league that's launching this month around women's sports, especially softball. John Paprikoff made the point. He's like, I've been amazed at how much the off-field cause marketing conversation around athletes is making its way into all the brand conversations. It's happened very quickly. And he says it feels seismic. It feels like it's a massive change for this industry. Your data actually bore that out for me. When I looked at it, I was like, this is top of mind for the fans.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, Josh, I think, when we sort of think about the future of sports and the future of sponsorship, is that we need to get everyone baked in having a great understanding of consumers, right? That's where it all starts. We have to knock down some of our preconceptions. We have to knock down some of the silos that we create in our businesses, and we need to listen. We need to listen to fans and consumers. And I think understanding the role of social impact and cause-related initiatives for the consumer today, but also the consumer of tomorrow is really, really important.
But I think in the past, the properties and brands have viewed some of these issues as lightning rods they want to stay away from. When I read the research that you put out, and when I listen to the other leaders on their leadership board, the very clear advice is no, lean into this stuff and figure out your position and embrace it.
Absolutely. Lean in, be a platform, think about your position, think about the key actors as well in your organizations, whether that's that's leadership, whether that's the athletes themselves. We're strongly urging our clients to lean in on this, not just here in the US, but worldwide.
Yeah, and it's a worldwide thing. I mean, you've seen the way some of these social issues have made their way around the world, and we're in a time where all this conversation is happening. And when I was promoting this conversation on LinkedIn, I linked to the college story that's out there right now around it's political, and we're not going to go there, but it's certainly drawing lines around the NCAA, around who's going to actually bring their students back, who's going to play. And your data says that these decisions aren't just school specific. They could have a long-term effect on the conference if they do this badly. Students get hurt, their health is at risk. This isn't just about making money, getting your media rights, and doing the politically correct thing for your geographic area. And that's an intense conversation, especially when you come to the consumer measurement, right? Which is the business you're in, which is how do you actually figure out if they're making the right brand decision when it comes to things like health and safety and the return of sport? Do you guys have an approach to that goes beyond some of the sentiment analysis you're doing? Is there a consultant that focuses on that at Nielsen?
Yeah, so I think I'm a strong believer around starting with the consumer and understanding sentiment of the consumer, but providing context around that in terms of what else is happening in the space. So who's doing it well in a different sport, in a different event, who's doing it well in a different country or region. And that's where we really dip into the expertise of our international team and our consulting team to provide some of best practice analysis. So when you combine that, here's the consumer insights with here's what's going on around the world in terms of best practice, then it's a nice marriage for our business to provide that to clients to help them make more informed decisions. I think the other thing is that we're able to network our clients quite well with each other as well. So we've created little informal insights groups amongst insights directors and VPs and managers at various organizations, and they huddle together and they talk about the type of work that we do and others do and where their pain points and challenges are. I really hope and I really believe that COVID is just a great opportunity for us to knock down some of these silos that exist in our businesses and between our businesses. I mean, we've just all humanized ourselves.
I think that's what everybody's hoping is the silver lining here, that there's some sort of new dialogue that emerges from this. Let me jump to Katrina's question here. She says that Nielsen's asset valuation process, you talked a little bit about this before, you include the very tangible stuff, which is like media exposure, impressions, things like that. But her question is really about the intangibles, the market, team, history. How important is that intangible side to the equation?
Yeah, look, great question. Yes, it's important. That obviously varies based on a brand's objective, where they're looking more for, tangible exposure and coverage and impact versus some of the softer measures around the valuation of association. We're doing a lot of work around our valuation tool right now, and we'll be through the back end of the year. Thinking about the value of IP, but also driving more down to sales attribution analysis and value. So look, this part will continue to be an important part. The intangible part I do see becoming a more important part of the equation going forward.
So the second part of her question is, and for the women's sports research, is there an appetite to move into Canada for some visibility? Do you guys do North America, or do you just focus on US for that?
No, so we do survey in Canada as well, and we have a number of clients in Canada. So you'll start to see some of the analysis of our survey work feature in our new research platform, Nielsen Fan Insights.
So Sandra asks, do you think that the exposure evaluation methods will need to adapt to take into account the size of the screen of the device that people are using in sports now? So very much the OTT versus the mobile platform. So, on a smaller device, clearly the logo doesn't render as well. Do you see this conversation happening with sponsors who are trying to figure out whether the asset they're selling renders correctly on one screen versus another?
Look, not a heap. I kind of think like I'm going to watch my mobile like this, and I'm now, I'm watching you on my laptop there, and on my 60-inch TV screen, it's a bit further back. For me, it's absolutely the same.
But you understand her question. I mean, I can't see Coca-Cola on here, but I might see Coca-Cola on there, but I definitely see Coca-Cola up there.
But I'd argue that you can see Coca-Cola on here because you are watching it like this. That's what I'd argue. You are watching it like this.
I'll buy that. I mean, I think there's something to that I haven't really thought through too much in terms of, the VizRT, Chiron, Higo sort of digital overlays that could, understand what device, what browser you're on, and what player you're using. There's definitely been a lot of that CGI-based advertising that perhaps you switch over to CGI-based advertising if you know the person's on mobile, because you're less confident they're seeing the physical assets in the venue.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, what might be interesting is to pair the screen time analysis then with like consumer recall.
Okay.
And see how that compares to, hey, I'm viewing on a mobile device, versus another platform to my, my 60-inch TV screen. I think that would be an interesting piece of analysis.
You're specifically on our and anybody else who has a question, keep them coming. These are great. You're on our next generation sponsorship leadership board. That's a board that thinks about the future of sponsorship. So I don't think it's unfair to ask you to look into your crystal ball and opine with me about what you think the future might look like. We have a thesis at the Sports Innovation Lab that we're going to move away from more and more of these category-specific sponsorships like official beverage partner, official payment partner, official blah, blah, blah. And we're going to move more toward experiences and behaviors that we think properties are going to start to package together and try to sell. They may include some of that, category exclusivity in it, but it's going to be more behavioral based or more experiential for the market. Do you think that's just pie in the sky crazy talk, or do you see some evidence that we're moving in that direction?
No, look, Josh, I'm in broad agreement with that. We're going to see more of a move to experience-based sponsorships and behavioral-based sponsorships, and more personalization, I think, around sponsorship activity. And I think it plays a lot to the conversation that we started around the role and impact of the consumer. I mean, like, one of the things we need to do is we need to get a good understanding around the consumer of today and the consumer of tomorrow, dispel some of the myths that maybe exist in the marketplace around the likes of Gen Zs. People say they aren't loyal, that they don't participate in sports, they're not interested in watching sports, they don't have disposable income. We have empirical evidence and analysis to suggest that none of that is true. And so people need to start understanding what their consumer of tomorrow might look like. We need to really understand the role of media in their lives, not just from a what, where, and how they consume, but how they interact. And again, I think there's a lot of learnings that we can take from the world of games and esports in terms of the immersive experiences that some of those platforms offer. I want to be able, I want my kids to be able to watch the Thursday night football and at the same time, like click into their Madden game and, you know, recreate it. But at the moment, kind of, you know, they have to do that by going into another room and getting onto another platform or doing that on their phone and stuff. So I'd love to see, you know, the time when we can do that and we can, you know, we can interact on that as well. And look, I think, again, we talked about the role of social and cause. I think that's really important. And I think you're going to see even more focus around, you know, athletes and influencers and the, you know, the power of one. I mean, just, you know, I would look at how someone like Bubba Wallace's stock has risen because of his advocacy, his activism, his influence around some societal events that have taken place recently, and how, you know, sponsors are getting behind him as well. I think he's landed Columbia Sportswear this week and Beats by Dre and Cash App over the past few weeks, you know, alongside already a stellar, you know, list of sponsors. And then, like, consider something like the astronomical event with Travis Scott and Fortnite. And I think that went up at the same time as the NFL draft, but, you know, you had sort of 5 million viewers tuning into that event across, you know, YouTube, Twitch, and through the Fortnite platform. Like, we're going to continue to see, you know, the importance of influencers and athletes going forward.
A lot of our clients talk about being held hostage by Twitter, Facebook, and all these platforms that collect first-party data. So they're working harder and harder to develop their own mobile platforms, their own OTT subscription platforms, things that allow them to collect first-party data. Do you see that as a trend that helps Nielsen's business long-term because they're more educated about what their consumers do and they know what they don't know? Or is this a thing that kind of flies in the face of buying, you know, Nielsen consumer data in the long term?
No, look, I think that's great that they're doing that. I really do. I think it's furthering their intelligence around their core consumer. Yeah, I would think of that as their avid consumer. That's really important. And I think, you know, where we can offer solutions is thinking about, you know, the consumer that sits somewhat outside of that, you know, outside of their core CRM or their core digital platforms, and how do they think about engaging, you know, those consumers? What are the hooks and barriers to engaging with them and motivating them to consume their content? So I think we have a great role to play there, as well as fusing some of our data, you know, with their first-party data. So, you know, if you want to kind of look at, well, what is the real impact of sponsorship and, you know, brand marketing? Use some of the frameworks that, you know, that Nielsen has, and apply that then to, you know, your CRM and your first-party data set rather than Nielsen's panel data.
And we were just talking with NBC, and they've got their total audience measurement or some sort of metric that they've created. That also speaks to the issue in the marketplace of everybody feeling like some of these properties are, you know, viewership is going down. So the properties must be dying. The next generation doesn't want to see this stuff. They're not as engaged anymore. Our soapbox at Sports Innovation Lab is that they're probably as engaged as they've ever been. They're just in different places, right? They could be watching highlights on YouTube. They could be playing 2K, and then they could be watching the game on, you know, an OTT platform that's not being measured by traditional linear broadcast ratings. Do you buy that? Do you buy the idea that, like, the you know, like, again, generationally, we might have some attention gap with these new fans, but that they're still engaged in traditional sports in a maybe even a more passionate way, more 24/7 way, because they can get the highlights here, play the game there, even when the game's not on TV?
Yeah, I do buy that. I think, you know,
it was a bit of a softball question, but I'm looking for you to say, yeah, I buy that, and here's the evidence, right? You guys must see some of this, right?
So, yeah, I buy it because when we, you know, here in the US, we run analysis every quarter on consumer time spent on media, And I know that the time spent with this goes up, and it continues to go up. So I don't doubt that people are, watching and consuming content, whether that's sports content, entertainment content, lifestyle content, news content through this. It's happening. We have the evidence to suggest that quarter over quarter, year over year. So I think that will continue. The challenge and the task and the priority for Nielsen is to be able to measure that, quantify it, provide industry currency data around it, and that's a big focus for the US media business here.
And is the biggest challenge the fact that there's so many different OTT platforms? Yeah,
we've got proliferation of platforms for one. That's the big challenge is keeping up with that. One of the principal challenges.
Is anybody offered up the opportunity to do a data exchange with all those OTT providers so that they can create a corollary to what you guys have done on linear broadcast?
Sorry, Josh.
That's all right. Yeah, sure. So on linear broadcast, there's a currency that Nielsen pretty much owns, which is that ratings or metric. Has anybody, in your opinion or in your experience, started to aggregate the OTT ratings in a meaningful way? Because the percentage of people, it's going up, to your point, and it keeps going up and it's accelerating. But has anybody been able to aggregate those metrics in a way that could be significant and used as a currency as well?
Yeah, look, I mean, we're doing that, and we're working with a lot of the platform providers, the social platforms, as well as the digital platform providers around digital content ratings. So we're doing that. We're on a path of doing that. We have a lot of clients in that space as well.
Do they use those ratings in conjunction with the TV ratings to get a holistic view, or do they view them as digital and linear?
So if your example on the NBC total audience analysis, it does exactly that. And look, and it also would include things like out of home as well.
Mm-hmm. So Brant asks, has Nielsen done any long-term research on the progression of female sports? A lot of people are here for female sports, love it. From 2000 to 2009, and then the next decade from 2010 to 2019. I'd be shocked if you had it from 2000 to 2009, but probably from 2010 to 2019. Did you guys do a lot of this at Repucom? Was there?
Yeah, we did. I think we put out our first Women in Sport report around about 2015. Look, at our big focus around this is maybe less on the rating side and actually more on the consumer side, and understanding interest in women's sports and women's sports events, looking at the contribution of female consumers for different types of sports and events, and understanding their attitudes and consumption habits. So we haven't done so much on the rating side. I mean, that's stuff that we can do. Our focus has been more to add more color to some of the thought leadership that we do. That's generally been based around consumer insights. We'd be very happy.
Angela's thesis and her soapbox on this stuff is that if there was more women competing on TV, there'd be better ratings, and there's like a tail wagging the dog kind of thing going on here. But if somebody wanted to take a historical look, to your point, women's sports events or women athletes competing in the Olympics. These are all professional athletes. They've been on TV before. Can you isolate your ratings to take a historical look at that? I just don't know how it works. So I'm wondering, I'm sure you have the data, but I'm wondering if you could slice it in that direction.
Yeah. So look, we slice data at a program level. The challenge with something like an Olympic Games is that you get a 4-hour, 8-hour, 10-hour broadcast, and you flip between heaps of different events and things. So, from a from a basic kind of like rating scrape, that would be difficult to do. You'd actually need to, be able to, digest the content, analyze it, ascertain time on screen for different events and things. And look, and we do a heap of that analysis as well. Auditing the content that is going out to provide clients with share of voice for different events, different sports in multi-sport events like the Olympic Games.
And when you think about sort of the future of measurement and where you need to go as a company, what things do you think you'll invest most in, without giving away any trade secrets? What do you've seen the market evolve very, very quickly, I think, in the last 10 years. Certainly, we've moved from this to the computer doing a lot of the machine learning and algorithmic sort of approach to measurement and sponsorship. We know that a lot of sponsorship buyers and sellers are, very comfortable running the old-fashioned way. What do you think really kind of just changes that?
Yeah. So, look, COVID, as I said earlier, has given us a good opportunity to really think about the future of our business and the sort of future state of sponsorship analytics. We're going to continue to focus on our core. There's some really important components to our core. The valuation service that we provide. Our focus is creating quicker turnaround on analysis around that, given the immediacy of today and the need for information quicker and to pair that information quicker. Continue to provide better access to that data, and I mean better fingertip access for our customers and their ability to be able to benchmark it, to run their own reports and analysis and stuff, and then think about predicting the future for them as well. Like, hey, Nielsen, you've got all of this data going back X number of years. Help me kind of predict future outcomes. So big focus around that on our valuation service, and then on the fan understanding side, I think we need to provide more on-demand analytics around consumers. So we've platformed a lot of our consumer research studies now to give fingertip access to our customers. We are going to be launching later this month in about 25 countries worldwide with the platform. So we need to continue doing that, and that helps our clients with their planning decisions because they understand, well, where the pockets of interest of consumers across different sports and entertainment genres, and then at a property and team level, and how does that compare to my domestic market versus other international markets. It helps them understand what their media consumption behaviors are through the survey data. It helps them understand, how they feel about brands and their affinity to different brands and the affinity to sponsorships. So, there's going to be a big focus there. And I think that, ultimately what we're looking at is like, well, how do we tie those pieces together? So we're not building, more and more platforms for specific data needs. We're building platforms for client use cases. And, think about how we best inform, decision-making across planning and selection, and what are the tools around that, and prospecting. What are the data tools that we provide around activation and in flight, and then what are the proof of performance tools? So that's the stuff.
I'm smiling because I think you and I both would love for technology and data to inform that entire selection and sponsorship process. We're coming toward the end of the hour. I'm wondering if you have an anecdote that makes me feel like that's the future, because most of this decision-making stuff happens in a luxury box, or because somebody took somebody out to a really nice golf outing or something like that. Relationships still matter so much in this industry. It's still a hospitality luxury sort of environment. Where do you feel like you've seen some glimmer of hope that two partners have gotten together, really analyzed the data, thought about the collective opportunity, and used Nielsen to its fullest to make a smart decision? Do you have one of those in your back pocket you could share with everybody before we wrap up?
Look, I'd love just to talk a little bit just about our relationship with the NFL. I really would. I mean, it's a partnership that has grown and enhanced and developed over the years. We're really thankful to have them as great client partners. we are providing analysis and insights right at the heart of their insights team and their decision-making team. So a lot of the work that we've been doing around return to sport, they are pairing and fusing that information with their own first-party data to help them help inform decisions that are going to be made around, well, what does the broadcast experience look like for the future season? To how do we think about return to football for consumers, and what are the impacts in different regions and across different demographics? And
have you seen them use the data to think differently about their sponsorship mix?
Sorry?
Have you seen them use the same data to think about changing up their sponsorship mix?
Yeah, look, and they're using a lot of their credit card data as well to think about their portfolio going forward as well. So they have a genuinely great insights team there. We provide a lot of data and insights and advice to them, and I think we're really proud of some of the decisions and things that they're thinking about going forward using our data and some of their first party data and other data they have.
Well, it's not a bad case study to be helping the NFL. So good luck and keep up with that. Clearly, we had a lot of interest in women sports and analysis around female athletes and what's emerging there. So keep plugging away at that too. A lot of these questions today were certainly geared around that. But one of the things I always like to do, John, is make sure that I don't get the last word. So is there anything you want to leave with before we wrap up? You get to drop the mic. You get to drop the mic.
Listen, I think, I urge everyone to lean in on the world of, data and analytics. It is becoming more important in our lives, and think about, how your organizations are set up around media. I think the days of having siloed departments around broadcast, radio, digital, owned and operated social, like they're gone. We need to bring those together, and that doesn't matter whether you're a sports property holder, you're in an agency environment, or you're in a brand environment. I think we need to do that. And the last thing I would just say is we are operating under very unique circumstances, and sometimes it feels very challenging. And especially if you're a leader in a business or with a team, it's really challenging. So just reflect a little bit on what you've come through and what you've achieved over the last 4, 5, 6 months, because I think that'll stand you in great stead for the future, whether that's in your own organization or in a different organization. They don't teach this stuff at business school.
They don't teach this stuff anywhere. No, that's very true. Well, I'll reiterate what you said. Yeah, I'll reiterate what you're saying, because I think the really interesting thing about COVID and the health crisis is that it's accelerated everything. And I see so many reactionary decisions being made, and sponsorship jamming themselves into a conversation that really should be, more about technology and fan experience than it should be about sponsorship right now. But you can't blame anybody for having that level of urgency. So, John, it's been great talking to you. Always enjoy our time together, but thanks for your patience with the audio and everything else. But this was very helpful. Thanks for joining us today, and stay safe.
Thanks, Josh. You too. Thanks, guys.
Well, man. See ya.